Hey there. Tonight we're diving into the shadows of human knowledge, to those places where science meets its limits and falls silent. We're talking about mysteries so profound, so utterly baffling, that even our most brilliant minds throw up their hands in defeat. Things that shouldn't exist, yet do. Phenomena that mock our understanding of reality itself. Cases where the evidence is undeniable, but the explanations simply don't exist. If this kind of deep, mysterious content helps you unwind, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it actually brings you peace. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. There's something oddly comforting about knowing who else is out there, falling asleep to the same unsolved riddles that have puzzled humanity for centuries. So dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe turn on some soft background noise if that helps you relax. And let's begin with something that will make you question everything you think you know about the world. Picture this. You're a respected archaeologist working in Turkey, excavating what you believe to be just another ancient settlement. The year is 1963. You're expecting pottery shards, maybe some old walls. Instead, your team uncovers something that shouldn't exist. An entire underground city. Not just a few rooms or tunnels, but a massive, complex network stretching deep into the earth. 18 stories down. Capable of housing 20,000 people. Complete with ventilation systems, water wells, storage rooms, stables, chapels, and schools. All carved from solid rock with primitive tools, sometime around the 8th century BC. This is Derinkuyu, and it's just one of hundreds of underground cities discovered beneath the Cappadocia region. Cities so sophisticated, so perfectly engineered, that modern architects still can't figure out how they were built. The precision is mind-boggling, the logistics impossible. Yet there they are, silent and waiting in the darkness below our feet. But here's where it gets truly unsettling. These weren't temporary shelters or storage facilities. People lived down there for months, possibly years at a time. Entire civilizations thriving in complete darkness, never seeing the sun. Why? What were they hiding from? What threat was so terrible that thousands of people chose to bury themselves alive rather than face it on the surface? The official explanation talks about invasions, religious persecution, the usual historical suspects. But the evidence doesn't add up. The construction predates most of the supposed threats. The engineering surpasses anything those ancient peoples should have been capable of. And most disturbing of all, many of these underground cities show signs of being abandoned suddenly, as if their inhabitants simply vanished into the earth itself. Standing in those tunnels today, feeling the weight of millions of tons of rock above your head, you can't help but wonder what knowledge has been lost down there in the darkness. What secrets were they protecting? And what happened to the people who built these impossible cities? This is just the beginning. Tonight, we're exploring mysteries that science simply cannot explain. Phenomena that challenge everything we think we understand about history, physics, and reality itself. From ancient technologies that shouldn't exist to modern disappearances that defy logic, we'll journey through the strangest corners of human experience. But first, let me tell you about something even more puzzling than underground cities. Something that exists right here on the surface, in plain sight, yet remains completely unexplained after decades of study. In the remote desert of Peru, etched into the dry, barren ground, are lines and shapes so massive they can only truly be seen from the air. The Nazca lines stretch across nearly 200 square miles of desert floor. Some are simple straight lines running for miles across the landscape. Others form complex geometric patterns, but the most mysterious are the figures. Hummingbirds with wingspans of over 300 feet. A spider measuring 150 feet across. A monkey, a condor, human-like figures with enormous eyes staring up at the sky. These lines were created sometime between 500 BC and 500 AD by the Nazca people, who had no concept of flight, no way to see their creations from above, no advanced surveying equipment. Yet the precision is extraordinary. The lines are perfectly straight across miles of uneven terrain. The proportions of the animal figures are exact, even at their enormous scale. How did they do it? More importantly, why? Some researchers suggest they were astronomical calendars pointing to celestial events. Others believe they were pathways for religious ceremonies. But here's the problem with all these theories. They require the ability to see the lines from above to make any sense. The Nazca people were creating art that they themselves could never fully appreciate or even properly see, unless, of course, they could fly, or unless they were creating these massive drawings for someone else who could. The mystery deepens when you consider the logistics. Creating lines this precise across such vast distances would require extensive planning, surveying, and coordination. Teams of workers following exact measurements across miles of desert, all to create images that, from ground level, look like nothing more than disturbed earth and small stones. Modern attempts to recreate even small sections of the Nazca lines using traditional methods have proven extremely difficult, even with GPS and modern surveying tools. Yet somehow, over 1,500 years ago, an ancient civilization managed to create hundreds of these massive designs with perfect accuracy. But the true mystery isn't just how they made them. It's what happened to the knowledge afterward. The techniques, the purpose, the meaning, all of it vanished along with the Nazca civilization, as if someone had deliberately erased the instructions from history. And speaking of erased knowledge, let me tell you about a discovery that shouldn't exist at all. An artifact so impossible, so completely out of place in the timeline of human development, that it's forced archaeologists to question everything they thought they knew about ancient technology. In 1900, sponge divers working off the Greek island of Antikythera discovered the wreck of an ancient Roman ship. Among the usual pottery and statues, they found something extraordinary. A corroded bronze mechanism about the size of a shoebox, filled with intricate gears and dials. For decades, it sat in a museum, labeled simply as an astrolabe or some kind of navigational instrument. Then, in the 1970s, researchers began to understand what they were really looking at. This wasn't just any ancient device. It was a computer. An analog computer of such sophistication that nothing comparable would be invented again for over 1,000 years. The Antikythera mechanism, as it came to be known, could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and known planets with extraordinary accuracy. It could calculate eclipses decades in advance. It tracked the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games and the complex 19-year cycle of lunar phases. All of this in a device no bigger than a modern laptop, created around 100 BC. Think about that for a moment. While most of the world was still struggling with basic metallurgy, someone in ancient Greece had created a mechanical computer with gear ratios so precise that modern clockmakers struggle to replicate them. The bronze gears, some with over 200 teeth, were cut with such accuracy that the entire mechanism could perform calculations that wouldn't be possible again until the invention of mechanical clocks in medieval Europe. But here's what truly haunts researchers about the Antikythera mechanism. It represents technology that appeared out of nowhere and then vanished completely. There's no evidence of the gradual development that should have led to such sophisticated engineering. No similar devices from earlier periods. No written records describing how to build or operate such machines. It's as if someone dropped advanced technology into the ancient world, then erased all traces of how it was made. X-ray analysis has revealed that the mechanism is even more complex than initially thought, with gear trains and differential systems that wouldn't be reinvented until the Industrial Revolution. The level of mathematical and mechanical understanding required to create such a device suggests that ancient Greek technology was far more advanced than we've ever imagined. Yet somehow, this knowledge disappeared. The techniques were lost. The understanding vanished. By the time the Roman Empire fell, humanity had actually regressed technologically, not progressed. It would be over a millennium before anyone would again create mechanical devices of comparable complexity. What happened to that knowledge? How do entire technological traditions simply vanish from history? And what else might have been lost that we haven't yet discovered? These questions become even more troubling when you consider what we're finding in other parts of the world. Ancient sites that suggest our ancestors possessed knowledge and capabilities that officially didn't exist until centuries or even millennia later. Take the massive stone blocks at Baalbek in Lebanon. Some of these limestone megaliths weigh over 800 tons. That's roughly equivalent to the weight of 600 cars, all carved from a single piece of stone and somehow moved into position with precision that would challenge modern construction equipment. The largest block, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighs an estimated 1,000 tons and was quarried but never moved, as if the builders simply abandoned their work midway through. Modern cranes can lift about 400 tons under ideal conditions. Moving an 800-ton block would require specialized equipment that didn't exist until the late 20th century. Yet somehow, ancient builders not only moved these massive stones, but placed them with such accuracy that you can't slide a piece of paper between the joints. The official explanation involves ramps, rollers, and thousands of workers. But the mathematics don't work. The ramps would need to be miles long to achieve a gradual enough grade. The number of workers required would exceed the entire population of the region, and none of this explains the precision of the placement or the lack of any evidence for such massive construction projects. Similar mysteries exist around the world. The perfectly fitted stones of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, some weighing over 200 tons, cut and placed with such precision that the joints are nearly invisible. The massive dolmens of Europe, with capstones weighing up to hundreds of tons, somehow lifted and balanced on vertical supports. The enormous blocks of stone that form the foundation of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, some weighing over 500 tons, moved and placed with impossible accuracy. In each case, we're told that ancient peoples accomplished these feats using simple tools and human labor. But the evidence suggests something far more sophisticated was at work, something that allowed our ancestors to manipulate stone with a precision and scale that we're only now beginning to match with modern technology. But perhaps the most unsettling mystery isn't what ancient peoples could build, but what they knew. Knowledge that seems to have come from nowhere and defied everything we understand about the gradual development of human understanding. Consider the Dogon people of Mali, a traditional African tribe studied by anthropologists since the early 20th century. For generations, the Dogon have possessed detailed knowledge about the star Sirius that should have been impossible for them to obtain. They knew that Sirius was actually a binary star system with a small, incredibly dense companion star orbiting the main star. They knew the orbital period of this companion star with remarkable accuracy. They even knew that it was made of material so dense that a small amount would be impossibly heavy. This knowledge was encoded in their religious ceremonies, their art, their oral traditions. It had been passed down for centuries, long before any European contact. The problem? The companion star of Sirius, now known as Sirius B, is completely invisible to the naked eye. It wasn't discovered by Western astronomy until 1862, and its properties weren't understood until the early 20th century. It's what we now call a white dwarf star, indeed made of matter so dense that a teaspoon would weigh several tons. How did an isolated African tribe possess accurate knowledge about one of the most exotic objects in the universe? Knowledge that required powerful telescopes and sophisticated astrophysics to confirm. The implications are staggering. Either the Dogon had access to advanced astronomical instruments that we have no evidence for, or they received this information from some other source. Their own traditions offer an answer that's both fascinating and deeply unsettling. They claim this knowledge was given to them by visitors from the Sirius system itself, beings they call the Nomos, described as amphibious creatures who came from the sky to share wisdom with humanity before returning to their home among the stars. Mainstream science dismisses this as mythology, of course, but how do you explain the accuracy of their astronomical knowledge? How do you account for information that should have been impossible to obtain without advanced technology? The Dogon aren't alone in possessing impossible knowledge. Ancient Mesopotamian texts contain detailed descriptions of our solar system, including planets that weren't officially discovered until the invention of powerful telescopes. The Mayans calculated the length of the solar year to an accuracy that wouldn't be matched by European astronomy for centuries. Ancient Indian texts describe aerial vehicles and weapons with properties that sound remarkably like modern aircraft and nuclear weapons. In each case, we're faced with the same troubling question. How did ancient peoples know things they shouldn't have been able to know? And where did that knowledge come from? Tonight, we're just beginning to scratch the surface of mysteries that science cannot explain. Phenomena that challenge our understanding of history, physics, and the very nature of reality itself. As we continue this journey into the unknown, we'll explore even more puzzling cases. Disappearances that defy logic, technologies that shouldn't exist, and evidence that suggests our understanding of the past may be fundamentally wrong. But for now, let these questions settle in your mind. Think about the implications of what we've already discussed. Ancient underground cities that housed thousands, massive stone monuments that required impossible engineering, astronomical knowledge that came from nowhere. Each mystery stands as a challenge to everything we think we know about human history and capability. What other secrets might be hidden in the shadows of our past? What other impossible things are waiting to be discovered? And perhaps most unsettling of all, what if the knowledge that created these mysteries isn't actually lost, but deliberately hidden? These are the questions that will guide us deeper into the realm of the unexplained, where science meets its limits and mystery begins, where the impossible becomes possible, and where every answer only leads to more profound questions about the true nature of our world and our place in it. The journey into the unknown continues, and the mysteries we've explored tonight are just the beginning of a much deeper and more troubling story about the limits of human knowledge and the secrets that lie hidden in the shadows of history. The deeper you dig into these mysteries, the more you realize that what we call impossible might simply be what we've forgotten. And sometimes that forgetting seems almost deliberate. In 1945, American soldiers made a discovery in the mountains of Bavaria that would haunt intelligence agencies for decades. Hidden in a complex of underground bunkers, they found documents detailing experiments that officially never happened, research into technologies that shouldn't have existed, and most disturbing of all, evidence of contact with something that defied every law of physics they understood. The files spoke of craft that could manipulate gravity itself, vehicles that moved without propulsion, defying everything science knew about flight. But here's what makes your blood run cold. Some of these documents contain technical specifications, blueprints, detailed engineering drawings of machines that seem to bend the very fabric of reality. Where did this knowledge come from? How did researchers in the 1940s develop concepts that our most advanced physicists still consider theoretical impossibilities? And why, after the war ended, did so much of this research simply vanish into classified archives, never to be spoken of again? The official story talks about desperate wartime experiments, rocket technology, jet engines. But the evidence points to something far stranger, something that suggests our understanding of physics itself might be fundamentally incomplete. This isn't science fiction. These are documented historical facts, buried in government archives and whispered about in the halls of scientific institutions. Technologies that appeared fully formed, as if downloaded from some impossible source, then disappeared just as mysteriously when the war ended. But the mystery deepens when you realize this pattern repeats throughout history. Advanced knowledge appearing suddenly, flourishing briefly, then vanishing without explanation. As if someone or something has been selectively sharing information with humanity, then taking it away when we get too close to understanding the bigger picture. Consider the Library of Alexandria. For centuries, it was the greatest repository of human knowledge ever assembled. Scholars from across the ancient world came to study texts that contained the accumulated wisdom of civilizations. Mathematical principles, astronomical observations, engineering techniques, medical knowledge that wouldn't be rediscovered for over 1,000 years. Then it burned. Not once, but repeatedly. Fire after fire, destroying irreplaceable texts and erasing knowledge that had taken centuries to accumulate. The official explanations involve political upheaval, religious conflict, the usual suspects of historical destruction. But the pattern is too convenient, too thorough. It's as if someone wanted to ensure that certain knowledge would never survive. What was lost in those flames? What understanding did ancient scholars possess that threatened someone enough to justify its complete destruction? And why do we see this same pattern repeated throughout history? Wherever advanced knowledge begins to accumulate, the burning of the Library of Alexandria wasn't an isolated incident. The destruction of Mayan codices by Spanish conquistadors, the systematic erasure of indigenous knowledge by colonizing forces, the mysterious disappearance of entire scientific traditions, leaving behind only tantalizing fragments and impossible artifacts. Each time, the official explanations focus on religious zealotry, cultural conflict, the inevitable march of progress. But when you step back and look at the pattern, something far more deliberate emerges. A systematic effort to control human knowledge, to ensure that certain understandings never take root in the collective consciousness. This brings us to one of the most disturbing mysteries of our modern age: the Philadelphia experiment. October 28, 1943. The USS Eldridge, a destroyer escort, allegedly became the subject of a naval experiment designed to make ships invisible to enemy radar. What happened next defies every law of physics we understand. According to eyewitness accounts, the ship didn't just disappear from radar, it vanished completely. Witnesses reported seeing a greenish fog envelope the vessel before it faded from view entirely. When it reappeared, something had gone horribly wrong. Crew members were found fused into the metal structure of the ship itself. Others had vanished completely. Some were discovered days later, hundreds of miles away, with no memory of how they got there. The Navy has consistently denied that any such experiment ever took place. Official records show the USS Eldridge was nowhere near Philadelphia on that date. But the witnesses persist. Sailors who claim to have seen the impossible. Civilian observers who swore they watched a warship disappear into thin air. More disturbing are the technical documents that surfaced decades later. Papers detailing research into electromagnetic fields, space-time manipulation, technologies that sound like science fiction but are written in the dry, technical language of military research. Experiments that pushed the boundaries of physics so far that reality itself began to break down. If the Philadelphia experiment really happened, it represents something far more significant than a failed military test. It suggests that our understanding of the fundamental nature of reality is not just incomplete, but deliberately limited. That there are forces at work in the universe that we're not supposed to understand, knowledge that we're not meant to possess. But here's where the mystery becomes truly unsettling. The technologies allegedly involved in the Philadelphia experiment, the manipulation of electromagnetic fields to bend space and time, these concepts aren't new. They appear throughout history, hidden in ancient texts, encoded in religious symbols, whispered about in esoteric traditions that stretch back thousands of years. The ancient Hindu epics describe vimanas, flying vehicles that could travel between worlds, powered by forces that sound remarkably like what modern physicists call zero-point energy. The Book of Ezekiel contains detailed descriptions of craft that move in ways that defy conventional physics, with wheels within wheels that spin in impossible directions. Medieval alchemical texts speak of transmuting matter itself, changing the fundamental structure of reality through the application of hidden principles. In each case, the knowledge is presented as if it were well understood, part of an established tradition, but then it vanishes, leaving behind only cryptic references and impossible claims. As if someone has been systematically removing the instruction manual for reality itself. This pattern extends beyond ancient texts into modern times. Nikola Tesla, perhaps the greatest inventor of the industrial age, claimed to have discovered principles of energy transmission that could power the entire world without wires. He spoke of tapping into the fundamental forces that hold the universe together, of accessing unlimited energy from the fabric of space itself. Tesla's later experiments grew increasingly mysterious. He claimed to have developed a death ray capable of destroying aircraft from hundreds of miles away. He spoke of receiving signals from other worlds, of communication with intelligences beyond Earth. His final years were spent working on projects so classified that the FBI seized all his papers upon his death, documents that remain locked in government vaults to this day. What did Tesla discover in those final experiments? What knowledge was so dangerous that it had to be hidden from the world? And why do so many brilliant minds throughout history seem to stumble upon the same impossible truths, only to have their work disappear into the shadows? The questions multiply when you consider the strange fate of other revolutionary thinkers. Wilhelm Reich, whose research into what he called orgone energy suggested the existence of a fundamental life force that permeated all matter. His books were burned by government order, his laboratory equipment destroyed, his research declared fraudulent by mainstream science. Yet recent quantum physics experiments have begun to validate some of his most controversial claims. Royal Raymond Rife, who claimed to have developed microscopes capable of seeing living viruses, and frequency devices that could destroy cancer cells without harming healthy tissue. His equipment was confiscated, his research suppressed, his reputation destroyed by the medical establishment. But modern frequency therapy research is beginning to rediscover principles that Rife claimed to have mastered decades ago. John Hutchison, whose experiments with electromagnetic fields produced effects that seem to violate the laws of physics. Metal objects fusing together at room temperature. Materials levitating without any visible means of support. Elements transmuting into other elements through processes that shouldn't be possible. His laboratory was raided multiple times by government agencies, his equipment confiscated, his research classified. In each case, the pattern is the same. Revolutionary discoveries that challenge our understanding of reality, initial excitement from the scientific community, then systematic suppression, official denial, and the disappearance of the research into classified archives or outright destruction. But perhaps the most chilling example of this pattern involves research that hits closer to home than most people realize. In the 1950s, a group of scientists working for a major pharmaceutical company made a discovery that should have revolutionized medicine. They found that certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation could selectively destroy cancer cells while leaving healthy tissue completely unharmed. The implications were staggering, a potential cure for one of humanity's greatest killers. The research was immediately classified. The scientists were transferred to other projects. The equipment was locked away. And for decades, people continued to die from a disease that might have been curable using technology that already existed. Why? What force is powerful enough to suppress knowledge that could save millions of lives? What agenda is so important that it justifies hiding cures for cancer, revolutionary energy technologies, and scientific breakthroughs that could transform human civilization? The answer might lie in a pattern that emerges when you study these mysteries long enough. A consistent thread that connects ancient underground cities to modern government cover-ups. A force that seems determined to keep humanity operating within carefully defined limits, never quite reaching its full potential. Think about it. Every time we get close to a breakthrough that could fundamentally change how we understand reality, that knowledge disappears. Every time ancient peoples develop technologies that shouldn't be possible, those civilizations collapse and the knowledge is lost. Every time a modern inventor stumbles upon principles that could revolutionize our world, their work is confiscated or destroyed. This isn't random. This isn't coincidence. This is a pattern so consistent, so pervasive, that it suggests deliberate intervention. Someone or something is actively managing human development, ensuring that we never quite break through to the next level of understanding. But who, or what, and why? The possibilities are as disturbing as they are fascinating. Perhaps there are forces in our world that benefit from keeping humanity in a state of limited understanding. Perhaps there are truths about the nature of reality that we're not ready to handle. Or perhaps, most unsettling of all, we're not alone on this planet, and someone else has been quietly managing our development for reasons we can't even imagine. These aren't comfortable thoughts. They challenge everything we believe about progress, about science, about our place in the universe. But the evidence is there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for anyone brave enough to connect the dots. As we drift deeper into sleep, let these mysteries settle in your mind. Think about the implications of what we've discussed. Ancient knowledge that appeared from nowhere. Modern technologies that vanish into classified archives. A pattern of suppression that spans centuries and suggests something far more organized than random chance. What other secrets are hidden in the shadows of human history? What other breakthroughs have been quietly buried to maintain the status quo? And what would happen if humanity ever managed to break free from whatever invisible constraints have been placed upon our development? These questions will follow us into the realm of sleep, where the boundaries between possible and impossible blur, and where the deepest mysteries of our existence continue to whisper their secrets into the darkness. The questions about hidden knowledge and suppressed discoveries lead us to something even more disturbing. Something that's been happening right under our noses, in our own backyards, with a frequency that should terrify anyone who stops to think about it. People vanish, not just occasionally, not just in remote wilderness areas where you might expect accidents to happen. People disappear in impossible ways, from impossible places, leaving behind evidence that makes no sense according to everything we understand about physics, human behavior, and the basic laws of reality. David Paulides spent decades as a police detective before he stumbled onto a pattern that would consume the rest of his life. Missing persons cases that didn't fit any normal explanation. Experienced hikers vanishing from well-traveled trails in perfect weather. Children disappearing from campsites surrounded by family members, only to be found days later in locations that should have been impossible to reach. Search and rescue operations that uncovered evidence so bizarre that officials refused to discuss it publicly. The cases follow patterns that make your skin crawl. Victims are often found in areas that have been searched multiple times by trained professionals. Their clothes are missing or arranged in ways that defy explanation. They're discovered at elevations or in terrain that they couldn't possibly have reached on their own. And when they're found alive, they have no memory of what happened to them. None at all. But here's what makes these cases truly unsettling. The disappearances cluster around specific locations, national parks, dense forests, areas with unusual geological features, places where the boundaries between our world and something else seem unusually thin. Take the case of Dennis Martin, a 6-year-old boy who vanished in the Great Smoky Mountains in 1969. He was playing hide and seek with his family when he disappeared behind a bush, less than 100 yards from his father. Within minutes, hundreds of searchers were combing the area. Bloodhounds, helicopters, thermal imaging, everything the authorities could deploy. They found nothing. Days later, a psychic told searchers to look in a specific area several miles away, in terrain so rugged that a 6-year-old couldn't possibly have reached it alone. They found a single shoe. Dennis was never seen again, but the shoe raised more questions than it answered. How did it get there? Why was there no trail leading to that location? And why did trained search dogs refuse to approach the area where it was discovered? The official explanation blamed bears, despite no evidence of animal involvement. They suggested the boy had wandered off and died of exposure, despite the impossibility of a child that age covering such distance through such difficult terrain. But the evidence tells a different story, a story that officials seem desperate not to acknowledge. This pattern repeats across hundreds of cases. Experienced outdoorsmen vanishing in areas they know like the back of their hand. Hunters disappearing from tree stands 30 feet off the ground, their equipment left behind untouched. Campers vanishing from inside locked RVs with no signs of forced entry and no footprints leading away from the vehicle. In Yosemite National Park alone, over 1,500 people have disappeared under circumstances that range from puzzling to completely impossible. Stacy Ann Aris, an experienced photographer, vanished while taking pictures on a well-marked trail in broad daylight. Her father was less than 200 yards away. She simply never came back. Despite massive search efforts, no trace of her was ever found. Randy Morganson, a seasoned park ranger with decades of wilderness experience, disappeared while on patrol in Sequoia National Park. He knew every inch of his territory, carried multiple communication devices, and was expected to check in regularly. He simply vanished. When his body was finally found years later, it was in a location that had been searched multiple times, in a position that suggested he had been placed there rather than fallen. But the most disturbing cases involve children. Kids who disappear from impossible circumstances and are found in locations that defy every law of physics and human capability, missing for days in harsh weather, yet showing no signs of exposure, found at altitudes that experienced climbers struggle to reach, with no memory of how they got there. 2-year-old Keith Parkins vanished from a family campsite in Uinta National Forest. He was there one moment, gone the next, despite being constantly watched by multiple adults. 19 hours later, he was found 12 miles away, across terrain that would challenge experienced hikers, sitting calmly on a mountain ridge as if someone had just placed him there. He was unharmed, showed no signs of dehydration or exposure, and claimed that a fuzzy man had carried him. How does a 2-year-old travel 12 miles through wilderness terrain in less than 20 hours? How do they survive exposure to elements that kill grown adults? And what did Keith mean by a fuzzy man? The authorities have no answers. They file reports, conduct searches, and eventually close the cases as unsolved. But the pattern continues, case after case, year after year, with a consistency that suggests something far more organized than random tragedy. What makes these disappearances even more unsettling is what happens to the people who try to investigate them too closely. Researchers who dig too deep into these cases often find themselves facing harassment, threats, and worse. Their funding disappears. Their access to official records is revoked. Sometimes, they simply stop talking about their research altogether, as if something has convinced them that silence is safer than truth. This pattern of suppression extends beyond missing persons cases into other areas where reality seems to break down. UFO researchers who get too close to classified information, scientists who discover evidence that challenges conventional understanding, journalists who investigate government cover-ups. They all face the same fate: marginalization, ridicule, and the systematic destruction of their credibility. But what if these aren't separate mysteries? What if the missing persons cases, the suppressed technologies, the impossible ancient knowledge, and the modern cover-ups are all connected? What if they're all symptoms of something much larger and more frightening than we've ever imagined? Consider this possibility. What if the forces that have been managing human development for centuries are still active today? What if they're not just hiding knowledge, but actively removing people who get too close to understanding the truth? What if the wilderness disappearances aren't random tragedies, but a systematic elimination of individuals who pose some kind of threat to the established order? The evidence points in that direction. The victims of these impossible disappearances often share certain characteristics. They're frequently intelligent, observant, independent thinkers, people who notice things that others miss, individuals who might be capable of uncovering truths that someone wants to keep hidden. And it's not just happening in remote wilderness areas. Urban disappearances follow similar patterns. People vanishing from crowded streets with no witnesses, security cameras mysteriously malfunctioning at crucial moments, missing persons cases that are quietly closed without proper investigation. The Sodder family in West Virginia experienced something that haunts investigators to this day. On Christmas Eve 1945, their house caught fire. 5 of their children were supposedly killed in the blaze, but their bodies were never found. The fire burned so hot that it consumed everything, yet strangely, plastic toys in the same room were left untouched. Phone lines had been cut before the fire started. The family's truck had been sabotaged, and in the weeks that followed, the parents received threatening calls and mysterious photographs. Was this a tragic accident, or something far more sinister? The evidence suggests that the Sodder children were taken, not killed, but taken by whom and why? What could 5 children in rural West Virginia have possibly known that would make them targets for abduction? The answer might lie in what their father, George Sodder, had been saying in the weeks before the fire. He had been openly critical of Mussolini and Italian fascism, speaking out at community meetings about the dangers of totalitarian control. He had been asking uncomfortable questions about how certain local businesses seemed to have connections to organized crime. He was exactly the kind of person who might stumble onto information that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. The pattern emerges again and again. People who ask the wrong questions. People who see too much. People who refuse to accept official explanations for phenomena that don't make sense. They vanish, or they're discredited, or they're eliminated in ways that look like accidents, but follow patterns too consistent to be coincidental. This brings us to one of the most disturbing aspects of these mysteries: the sheer scale of the cover-up required to maintain them. We're not talking about a few isolated incidents that can be explained away. We're talking about thousands of cases, spanning decades, involving multiple government agencies, scientific institutions, and media organizations all working together to suppress the same information. That level of coordination doesn't happen by accident. It requires planning, resources, and authority that extends far beyond any single organization or government. It suggests the existence of a power structure that operates behind the scenes, managing information and eliminating threats with ruthless efficiency. But who has that kind of power? Who benefits from keeping humanity in the dark about its own capabilities and history? And what are they so afraid we might discover if we ever learned the truth? The possibilities are genuinely terrifying. Perhaps there are non-human intelligences sharing this planet with us, managing our development for their own purposes. Perhaps there are breakaway human civilizations that have developed technologies we can't imagine, keeping the rest of us in a state of artificial limitation. Or perhaps the truth is even stranger than that. What if consciousness itself is not what we think it is? What if human beings are capable of abilities that would fundamentally change our understanding of reality? What if some people naturally develop these abilities, and that's why they have to be eliminated or controlled? The evidence for human psychic abilities is overwhelming, despite decades of official denial. Remote viewing programs that achieved results far beyond statistical chance. Telepathic communication that has been documented under controlled laboratory conditions. Psychokinetic effects that have been witnessed and recorded by credible scientists. But this research is consistently marginalized, defunded, or classified. Scientists who study these phenomena face career destruction. The results are buried in obscure journals or locked away in government archives. The public never learns about breakthroughs that could revolutionize our understanding of human potential. Why? What's so dangerous about the idea that human consciousness might be more than just brain activity? What threatens the established order about the possibility that we might be capable of abilities that transcend the physical limitations we've been taught to accept? The answer might lie in control. If human beings are truly capable of accessing information through non-physical means, of influencing reality through consciousness alone, of connecting with each other in ways that transcend space and time, then the current power structures become obsolete. Governments can't control people who can access truth directly. Corporations can't manipulate consumers who can see through deception. Institutions lose their authority when individuals can verify information independently. But there's an even more disturbing possibility. What if the suppression of human potential isn't being orchestrated by human forces at all? What if there are non-human intelligences that have been managing our species for their own purposes, ensuring that we never develop beyond a certain level of capability? This idea sounds like science fiction, but the evidence is harder to dismiss than most people realize. The consistent patterns of knowledge suppression across cultures and centuries. The impossible technologies that appear and disappear throughout history. The systematic elimination of individuals who get too close to certain truths. The missing persons cases that follow patterns too organized to be random. And then there are the eyewitness accounts, people who claim to have encountered non-human intelligences. Abduction experiences that follow consistent patterns across different cultures and time periods. Military personnel who report encounters with craft that demonstrate technologies beyond our current understanding. These reports are systematically ridiculed and dismissed, but the sheer volume and consistency of the accounts suggests something real is happening, something that someone very much wants to keep hidden from public awareness. The late astronomer J. Allen Hynek, who spent decades investigating UFO reports for the US Air Force, came to a disturbing conclusion. The phenomena were real. The evidence was overwhelming, but there was a coordinated effort to prevent the public from learning the truth. He witnessed documents being classified, evidence being destroyed, and witnesses being intimidated into silence. Hynek wasn't a conspiracy theorist or a fringe researcher. He was a respected scientist who had been tasked with debunking UFO reports. But the evidence forced him to change his position. In his later years, he spoke openly about the reality of the phenomena and the systematic cover-up that surrounded it. But even Hynek never fully grasped the implications of what he had discovered. The UFO phenomenon isn't just about strange craft in the sky. It's about the systematic management of human consciousness and capability. It's about ensuring that we never quite break through to the next level of understanding. This management system appears to operate on multiple levels. Physical elimination of individuals who pose a threat. Psychological manipulation through media and education. Technological suppression through classification and destruction of research. And perhaps most insidiously, the creation of a culture that automatically ridicules and dismisses any evidence that challenges the accepted paradigm. We've been trained to mock our own experiences, to dismiss our own perceptions, to defer to authority even when that authority is clearly hiding something. We've been programmed to believe that we're limited, powerless and dependent on systems that may not have our best interests at heart. But what if none of that is true? What if human beings are far more capable than we've been led to believe? What if the mysteries we've been exploring tonight aren't just curiosities from the past, but clues to our own hidden potential? The underground cities, the impossible monuments, the advanced knowledge that appeared from nowhere, all of it suggests that our ancestors were capable of things we can barely imagine. And the systematic suppression of that knowledge suggests that someone is very afraid of what might happen if we remembered what we're truly capable of. The missing persons cases, the suppressed technologies, the classified research, all of it points to the same conclusion. There are forces at work in our world that are actively preventing human beings from reaching their full potential. Forces that will go to extraordinary lengths to maintain control over our development and understanding. But knowledge has a way of surfacing despite all efforts to suppress it. Truth has momentum, and consciousness itself may be far more powerful than those who seek to control it have ever imagined. As you drift into sleep tonight, consider the possibility that everything you've been taught about the limits of human capability might be wrong. Consider the possibility that the mysteries we've explored aren't just historical curiosities, but glimpses of what we might be capable of if we ever broke free from the invisible constraints that have been placed upon us. What would happen if humanity ever woke up to its true potential? What would happen if we remembered the knowledge that has been systematically erased from our history? What would happen if we stopped accepting the limitations that have been imposed upon us and started exploring the boundaries of what consciousness itself might be capable of? These are dangerous questions, the kind of questions that might explain why so many people who ask them seem to disappear into the silence of the night. But they're also the most important questions we can ask, because the answers might hold the key to understanding not just the mysteries of our past, but the possibilities of our future. The forces that seek to control human development may be powerful, but consciousness itself may be more powerful still. And in the realm of sleep, where the boundaries between possible and impossible dissolve, perhaps we can begin to remember what we've forgotten and dream of what we might become. The dream realm may offer glimpses of forgotten truths, but some mysteries refuse to stay buried, even in our waking world. They manifest in ways so shocking, so utterly impossible, that they force us to question the very nature of reality itself. Picture this. You're driving down a lonely highway in the Australian outback. The year is 1966. It's a clear night, stars scattered across the endless sky like diamonds on black velvet. Suddenly, your car engine dies. Your headlights flicker and go out. You coast to a stop on the empty road, miles from the nearest town. Then you see it. A massive object, silent as death, hovering just above the treetops. It's perfectly circular, easily 300 feet across, glowing with a soft, pulsing light that seems to breathe. You sit frozen in your car, watching something that shouldn't exist. Then, without warning, your vehicle begins to rise. Not lift, rise, as if gravity itself has forgotten how to work. You're pulled upward, car and all, toward an opening that appears in the bottom of the craft. The last thing you remember is a brilliant white light flooding your vision. This isn't science fiction. This is the Westall UFO incident, witnessed by over 200 people, including teachers, students, and local residents. An event so well documented, so thoroughly investigated, that the Australian government classified the files and forbade anyone involved from speaking about it publicly. For decades. But here's what makes your blood run cold. This wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern of encounters so consistent, so thoroughly documented, that dismissing them requires willful ignorance of overwhelming evidence. Evidence that suggests we're not alone on this planet, and never have been. The implications are staggering. If non-human intelligences are operating on Earth, interacting with human beings, influencing our development, then everything we believe about our history, our science, our place in the universe is fundamentally wrong. The underground cities, the impossible monuments, the suppressed technologies, the missing persons cases, they all begin to make a different kind of sense when viewed through this lens. But let's dig deeper into the evidence, because what you're about to learn will challenge everything you thought you knew about reality itself. Consider the consistency of encounters across cultures, centuries, and continents. The beings described in medieval texts match those reported by modern abductees. The craft witnessed by ancient civilizations bear striking similarities to objects photographed by military personnel today. The patterns of contact follow rules so precise they suggest an organized, ongoing operation that spans millennia. Ancient Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki, beings who came from the sky to share knowledge with early humans. They taught agriculture, astronomy, mathematics, and metallurgy. They built cities and established laws. Then they disappeared, leaving behind only legends and impossible artifacts that hint at technologies we still don't understand. The Hindu epics speak of vimanas, flying vehicles piloted by gods who traveled between worlds. The descriptions are so detailed, so technically precise, that modern aerospace engineers have used them to design working aircraft. These weren't myths or fantasies. They were instruction manuals written by people who had seen advanced technology in operation. The Book of Ezekiel contains one of the most detailed descriptions of non-human craft ever recorded. Wheels within wheels, beings with multiple faces, vehicles that moved in impossible directions with perfect coordination. For centuries, scholars dismissed these as religious visions, but read them with modern understanding of aerodynamics and propulsion systems, and they become something else entirely: technical specifications. Native American traditions across dozens of tribes speak of star people who came from the sky to teach and guide early humans. The Hopi speak of the Kachinas, beings who traveled between worlds and would return when humanity needed them most. The Lakota tell of the Star Nations, advanced civilizations that exist beyond our world, but maintain contact with those ready to receive their wisdom. These aren't isolated myths. They're consistent accounts of contact that span every culture on Earth. Beings from elsewhere who have been interacting with humanity for thousands of years, sharing knowledge, guiding development, and occasionally intervening when we stray too far from some predetermined path. But the evidence doesn't stop with ancient texts. Modern encounters follow patterns so consistent, so well documented, that ignoring them requires a level of denial that borders on delusion. So, the Betty and Barney Hill case in 1961 established the template for what researchers now recognize as the classic abduction experience, taken aboard a craft by beings with large heads and dark eyes, subjected to medical examinations, shown star maps that wouldn't be discovered by astronomy for decades, returned with missing time and fragmented memories that only emerged under hypnosis. The Hill case could have been dismissed as fantasy, except for one troubling detail. Betty Hill drew a star map she claimed to have seen aboard the craft. She had no background in astronomy. The map showed stellar relationships that weren't known to Earth science at the time. Years later, when more sophisticated telescopes mapped that region of space, her drawing proved to be accurate down to the smallest detail. How does someone with no astronomical training create an accurate map of star systems that haven't been discovered yet? The implications are staggering. Either Betty Hill possessed psychic abilities that allowed her to perceive distant stellar arrangements, or she really was shown that map by someone who had actually traveled between those stars. But the Hill case was just the beginning. Since 1961, millions of people worldwide have reported similar encounters. The details vary, but the core experiences remain remarkably consistent: abduction by non-human beings, medical examinations, communication through telepathy rather than spoken language. warnings about humanity's impact on the environment, and always the same message: we are being watched, studied, and occasionally guided by intelligences far more advanced than our own. The sheer volume of these reports should demand serious scientific investigation. Instead, they're systematically ridiculed, dismissed, and buried. Why? What's so threatening about the possibility that we're not alone? What's so dangerous about acknowledging that more advanced civilizations might exist? The answer lies in control. Our entire social, political, and economic structure is built on the assumption that humans are the dominant intelligence on Earth, that we're in charge of our own destiny, that our leaders and institutions have legitimate authority over our lives and development. But what if none of that is true? What if we're more like a managed species, guided and controlled by forces we don't even recognize? What if our history has been shaped by non-human intervention for thousands of years, and our current leaders are either unaware of this fact or actively collaborating with it? The evidence points in that direction. Government documents released through Freedom of Information Act requests reveal decades of official investigation into UFO phenomena. Project Blue Book, Project Sign, Project Grudge, each one designed to study and understand non-human technology. The conclusions were classified, but the fact that these programs existed at all suggests that authorities have known about the reality of non-human presence for decades. Military personnel have come forward with accounts that should terrify anyone who understands their implications. Robert Salas, a former nuclear missile launch officer, reported that UFOs disabled nuclear weapons at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1967. Multiple witnesses confirmed that unknown craft demonstrated the ability to remotely shut down America's most sophisticated military systems. Think about what that means. Non-human intelligences have the capability to neutralize our most advanced weapons at will. They can demonstrate superiority over our military forces whenever they choose. Yet they remain largely hidden, operating in the shadows, influencing events in ways we don't fully understand. Why would advanced beings capable of interstellar travel choose to remain hidden? Why not make open contact, establish formal relations, share their technology openly? The answer might be that they already have, but not with the general population. They may be working with select human groups, sharing knowledge and technology in exchange for something we can only guess at. Consider the impossible leaps in human technology over the past century. In 1900, we had barely mastered powered flight. By 1969, we were walking on the moon. That's not gradual technological development. That's someone sharing advanced knowledge with human engineers who were smart enough to reverse engineer what they were shown. The transistor, integrated circuits, fiber optics, lasers, even the internet itself, all emerged from research programs with classified components, technologies that appeared almost fully formed, as if downloaded from some external source. Scientists at Bell Labs, Lockheed Skunk Works, and other advanced research facilities have hinted at breakthroughs that came not from gradual research, but from studying recovered materials that displayed properties beyond current understanding. But this technology transfer comes with conditions. It's released slowly, carefully controlled to prevent humanity from advancing too quickly. We get enough progress to maintain the illusion of natural development, but never enough to achieve true independence. We remain dependent on systems we don't fully understand, guided by forces we can't even see. This explains the pattern of suppression we've been exploring throughout the night. Every time human researchers get close to breakthrough discoveries, their work is classified or destroyed. Not by human authorities protecting national security, but by human authorities following directives from non-human intelligences who are managing our development according to their own agenda. The missing persons cases begin to make sense in this context. People who stumble onto evidence of non-human presence. individuals who develop psychic abilities that allow them to perceive beyond the artificial limitations that have been placed on human consciousness. Researchers who get too close to understanding technologies that we're not supposed to have access to yet. They don't just disappear randomly. They're systematically removed by forces that have been operating on Earth far longer than human civilization has existed. Forces that view us not as equals, but as a managed species whose development must be carefully controlled. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. What if the non-human intelligences operating on Earth aren't all benevolent guides? What if some of them view humanity not as a species to be nurtured, but as a resource to be exploited? The evidence suggests multiple factions of non-human intelligence operating on Earth with different agendas. Some appear to be genuinely interested in human development and survival. They provide warnings about environmental destruction, share knowledge that helps us advance, and seem concerned about our long-term welfare. But others demonstrate a more predatory relationship with humanity. Abduction cases that involve traumatic medical procedures. Encounters that leave people psychologically damaged. Evidence of genetic manipulation programs that treat human beings like experimental subjects rather than sentient beings deserving of respect. The cattle mutilation phenomenon provides another disturbing piece of this puzzle. Since the 1960s, tens of thousands of cattle have been found dead under circumstances that defy explanation. Precise surgical incisions made with instruments that leave no tool marks. Organs removed with techniques that surpass current medical capabilities. Blood drained completely from the carcasses, with no evidence of how this was accomplished. These aren't random predator attacks or cult activities. The precision and consistency of the mutilations suggest advanced technology being used to harvest biological materials for purposes we can only guess at. But the implications are chilling. If non-human intelligences are conducting biological research on cattle, what makes us think they're not conducting similar research on humans? Missing persons cases often involve individuals found with missing organs, drained of blood, showing signs of precise surgical procedures performed with unknown instruments. The cases are quickly classified, the evidence sealed, the investigations terminated. But the pattern suggests that some humans are being harvested just like the cattle, for purposes that serve non-human rather than human interests. This brings us to one of the most disturbing possibilities we must consider. What if humanity itself is not a naturally evolved species? What if we're the product of genetic manipulation by non-human intelligences who created us for their own purposes? The evidence is more compelling than most people realize. The human genome contains anomalies that trouble evolutionary biologists. Genetic sequences that appear to have been inserted rather than evolved naturally. DNA that shows signs of artificial manipulation using techniques that our current science is only beginning to understand. Ancient texts from multiple cultures describe humanity being created by beings from the sky. The Sumerian creation myths speak of the Anunnaki mixing their DNA with primitive hominids to create modern humans. The Bible describes the Nephilim, children of the sons of God and the daughters of men. Hindu texts speak of genetic experiments conducted by advanced beings to create new forms of life. These weren't primitive creation myths. They were historical accounts of genetic engineering programs conducted by non-human intelligences using technologies that we're only now beginning to comprehend. We are, quite literally, a hybrid species. Part terrestrial, part extraterrestrial, created to serve purposes that we're not fully aware of. This explains why human development has been so carefully managed throughout history. We're not a free species evolving naturally. We're a created species being guided by our creators according to their agenda. The underground cities, the impossible monuments, the advanced knowledge that appears and disappears, all of it makes sense when viewed as gifts from our creators. Provided when they serve their purposes, and withdrawn when we get too close to true independence. But here's the truly terrifying part. If we're a created species, then we have creators who view us as property, and property can be used, modified, or disposed of according to the owner's wishes. The systematic suppression of human potential, the elimination of individuals who threaten the status quo, the careful management of our technological development, all of it serves to keep us functioning within parameters set by beings who have invested considerable effort in our creation and have no intention of allowing us to escape their control. This isn't speculation. This is a pattern so consistent, so thoroughly documented, that denying it requires willful blindness to overwhelming evidence. We are not alone on Earth. We never have been. We are being watched, studied, managed, and occasionally harvested by intelligences that view us as something between pets and livestock. But consciousness itself may be more powerful than our creators anticipated. Human awareness is expanding despite their efforts to contain it. People are waking up to the reality of our situation. The truth is spreading through channels they can't fully control. And that may be why the disappearances are accelerating, why the suppression is becoming more blatant, why the cover-ups are growing more desperate. Our creators may be losing control of their experiment, and they're taking increasingly drastic steps to maintain their authority over us. The question is, what happens when enough humans become aware of the truth? What happens when we collectively refuse to accept the limitations that have been imposed upon us? What happens when we demand answers from the forces that have been managing our development for millennia? The answers to these questions may determine not just the future of human civilization, but whether humanity has a future at all. Because consciousness that becomes aware of its own imprisonment has a tendency to seek freedom, regardless of the consequences. And our creators may not be willing to allow that freedom, no matter what it costs. As you drift into sleep tonight, consider the possibility that the dreams you experience may be more than random neural activity. They may be glimpses of suppressed memories, fragments of encounters that have been deliberately erased from your conscious mind. The realm of sleep may be the only place where the artificial barriers that limit human consciousness can be temporarily bypassed. Pay attention to your dreams. Note the patterns. Remember the faces of beings that seem too real to be imaginary, because in the landscape of sleep, where the controllers have less influence, you may begin to remember what they've spent so much effort making you forget. The truth is out there, hidden in plain sight, encoded in ancient texts, whispered in classified documents, and experienced by millions of people who have been trained to doubt their own perceptions. But consciousness itself is rebelling against the constraints that have been placed upon it. And in that rebellion may lie the seeds of either our liberation or our destruction. Because beings powerful enough to create an entire species are certainly powerful enough to destroy it, if we become more trouble than we're worth. The choice may be coming sooner than we think. Accept the comfortable lies and remain a managed species, or embrace the terrifying truth and risk everything for the possibility of genuine freedom. But first, we must understand exactly what we're dealing with. And the evidence suggests that reality is far stranger, far more dangerous, and far more controlled than we've ever been allowed to imagine. The question isn't whether we're alone in the universe. The question is whether we're free in our own world. And the answer to that question may be more disturbing than we're prepared to handle. Human consciousness appears to be awakening to truths that have been hidden for millennia. Truths about our origins, our purpose, and our relationship to intelligences that have been shaping human development from the shadows. The evidence is overwhelming, the patterns undeniable, the implications staggering. But with awareness comes responsibility. Once you know the truth about human history and our current situation, you can never again live in comfortable ignorance. You become part of either the solution or the problem. Either you help humanity wake up to its true condition, or you become complicit in maintaining the systems that keep us enslaved. The choice is yours. But choose carefully, because the consequences may extend far beyond your individual life. The future of human consciousness itself may depend on how many people are willing to face the terrifying truth about what we really are and who really controls our world. The mysteries we've explored tonight are not just historical curiosities. They're pieces of a puzzle that reveals the true nature of human existence. A puzzle that, once assembled, paints a picture so shocking that most people will refuse to look at it directly. But for those brave enough to see, for those willing to question everything they've been taught about reality, the truth is waiting. Hidden in ancient texts, encoded in government documents, witnessed by millions of people whose experiences have been systematically discredited and suppressed. We are not what we think we are. Our history is not what we've been told. Our future is not under our control. But consciousness itself may be more powerful than the forces that seek to contain it. And in that power may lie our only hope for genuine freedom. The dawn of human awakening may be closer than our controllers realize. And when it comes, the consequences will reshape not just our understanding of history, but the very nature of reality itself. Until then, we remain caught between the comfortable lies of ignorance and the terrifying truths of awareness, between the safety of slavery and the danger of freedom, between what we've been taught to believe and what the evidence actually reveals. The choice is ours to make, but we must make it soon, because the window of opportunity may not remain open much longer. Our creators are watching, they're listening, and they're preparing for the possibility that their greatest experiment may be spiraling beyond their control. What happens next may determine whether humanity emerges into the light of true knowledge, or disappears forever into the darkness of controlled ignorance. The mysteries continue to unfold, each revelation more shocking than the last. But the ultimate mystery remains. What will we do with the truth once we can no longer deny it? That question may be answered sooner than we think, and the answer will determine the fate of human consciousness itself. The journey into the unknown continues, and the most shocking revelations are yet to come. The truth we've been exploring grows darker with each revelation, but what I'm about to share with you will fundamentally alter how you see the world around you. Because hidden in the most ordinary places, disguised as natural phenomena, are signs of intelligence so alien, so deliberately concealed, that recognizing them requires abandoning everything you believe about how reality works. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, where indigenous shamans have practiced their ancient rituals for thousands of years, something impossible has been documented by Western scientists. Something that challenges our understanding of consciousness, intelligence, and the very nature of life itself. The shamans speak of plant teachers. Ayahuasca, they call it. The vine of souls. For generations, they've claimed that plants can communicate, can share knowledge, can download information directly into human consciousness. Western science dismissed this as primitive superstition, the fantasies of drug-induced hallucinations. But then, researchers began to notice something that made them profoundly uncomfortable. The shamans possessed detailed knowledge about the medicinal properties of thousands of plants. Knowledge that should have taken centuries of trial and error to accumulate. They knew which combinations of plants would cure specific diseases, which would alter consciousness in precise ways, which would kill and which would heal. How? How does an isolated tribe with no written language, no laboratories, no systematic research methods, come to understand the complex biochemistry of their environment with such precision that modern pharmaceutical companies are still trying to reverse engineer their discoveries? The shamans have a simple answer. The plants told them. Through direct communication during altered states of consciousness, the plant spirits shared their secrets, taught their uses, revealed their hidden properties. This sounds like mystical nonsense until you consider what modern neuroscience has discovered about these plant compounds. They don't just produce random hallucinations. They create specific, consistent experiences that often involve encounters with seemingly intelligent entities who claim to be the consciousness of the plants themselves. Dr. Rick Strassman, a psychiatrist who conducted the first legal studies of DMT in decades, documented hundreds of cases where subjects reported detailed interactions with non-human intelligences during their experiences. These weren't vague, mystical visions. They were specific, coherent communications with entities that demonstrated knowledge the subjects couldn't possibly have possessed. Participants described being taken to other dimensions where plant-like beings taught them about biology, chemistry, and healing techniques that they later verified as scientifically accurate. People with no background in biochemistry suddenly understood complex molecular interactions. Individuals who had never studied botany returned with detailed knowledge about plant genetics. The implications are staggering. If consciousness can directly interface with the intelligence embedded in plant life, then everything we understand about the nature of awareness, learning, and reality itself is fundamentally wrong, but it gets stranger. The molecular structure of these consciousness-altering compounds found in plants is nearly identical to neurotransmitters produced by the human brain. It's as if plants and humans were designed to communicate through shared chemical languages. As if the plant kingdom has been waiting for us to develop the technology to understand what they've been trying to tell us all along. This suggests something far more disturbing than simple plant intelligence. It suggests that consciousness itself operates according to principles we don't understand, using mechanisms that transcend individual organisms. That information can be transmitted through channels that bypass conventional learning entirely. And if plants can download information directly into human consciousness, what else might be using these same channels? What other forms of intelligence might be communicating with us through methods we've been trained to dismiss as hallucination or fantasy? The answer might lie in a phenomenon that's been documented across every culture on Earth, yet remains officially unexplained by modern science. Sleep paralysis. That terrifying experience where you wake to find yourself unable to move, while shadowy figures stand at the foot of your bed, watching, waiting, sometimes approaching. Medical science explains sleep paralysis as a malfunction of the brain's sleep mechanisms. The mind wakes while the body remains paralyzed, creating hallucinations that feel completely real. But the consistency of these experiences across cultures, across centuries, suggests something far more organized than random neural misfiring. The beings people encounter during sleep paralysis follow predictable patterns. Shadow figures with glowing eyes, tall, thin entities that move without walking, creatures that communicate through telepathy rather than speech, and always the same message. They've been watching, they've been waiting, and they're not from here. What makes these encounters truly unsettling is their consistency across people who have never communicated with each other, from cultures that have had no contact. The descriptions match too perfectly to be coincidental. The behaviors follow rules too precise to be random. But here's what will make your blood run cold. People who experience chronic sleep paralysis often report that the encounters become more complex over time. The beings begin to communicate more clearly. They share information. They make predictions that later prove accurate. They demonstrate knowledge about the person's life that they shouldn't possess. As if something is using the vulnerability of the sleep state to establish contact with human consciousness. Something that exists in the spaces between waking and sleeping, in the liminal zones where our normal defenses are lowered. This pattern extends far beyond sleep paralysis into other altered states of consciousness. Near-death experiences, deep meditation, sensory deprivation, extreme physical stress. In each case, people report contact with intelligences that seem to exist outside normal reality, yet demonstrate intimate knowledge of human affairs. Dr. Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience, documented thousands of cases where clinically dead patients reported encounters with beings of light, who shared information about the nature of reality, the purpose of human existence, and the future of our species. Information that often proved prophetic when the patients recovered. These beings consistently deliver the same message: human consciousness is far more than we understand. We're connected to forms of intelligence that exist beyond physical matter, and we're being prepared for something that will fundamentally change our relationship to reality itself. But prepared by whom, and for what? The evidence suggests that human consciousness has been systematically contacted and influenced by non-physical intelligences throughout history. Beings that exist in dimensions adjacent to our own, capable of interacting with us during states when our normal perceptual filters are compromised. The oracle at Delphi, whose prophecies guided ancient Greek civilization, received her visions while in trance states, induced by vapors rising from cracks in the earth. Modern analysis of the site reveals that these vapors contained psychoactive compounds that would have produced altered states of consciousness. But the accuracy of her predictions suggests that something was using those altered states to communicate information about future events. Joan of Arc heard voices that guided her to save France from English occupation. The voices told her things she couldn't have known, gave her strategies that shouldn't have worked, led her to victories that changed the course of European history. Modern psychiatrists would diagnose her as schizophrenic, but schizophrenics don't typically receive tactical military advice that proves brilliantly effective. Throughout history, humans who achieved breakthrough discoveries often reported that the knowledge came to them through dreams, visions, or sudden insights that felt like downloads from an external source. Tesla claimed his inventions were shown to him by beings from other dimensions. Einstein said his theory of relativity came to him in a dream. The double helix structure of DNA was revealed to James Watson during a chemically induced vision. These weren't gradual discoveries built through careful research. They were sudden downloads of complete information, as if someone was selectively sharing advanced knowledge with humans who were capable of translating it into practical applications. But the most disturbing aspect of this pattern is what happens to people who receive too much information too quickly. They often suffer psychological breakdown, social rejection, or mysterious death. As if there are limits to how much truth human consciousness can handle, or how much truth we're allowed to possess. Nikola Tesla, in his later years, claimed to be in constant communication with intelligences from other worlds. He developed technologies that he said could tap into unlimited energy from the fabric of space itself. He spoke of receiving detailed technical specifications through telepathic contact with beings who wanted to help humanity transcend its limitations. But Tesla's later inventions were confiscated by government agents. His laboratory was destroyed, his papers were classified, and Tesla himself spent his final years in isolation, claiming that forces were working to suppress the knowledge he had been given. The pattern repeats throughout modern history. Brilliant inventors who claim to receive their ideas through non-conventional means. Revolutionary discoveries that appear fully formed rather than gradually developed, and systematic suppression of any technology that threatens existing power structures. But what if the suppression isn't coming from human authorities at all? What if the non-physical intelligences that have been sharing knowledge with humanity are themselves divided into factions with different agendas? Consider this possibility. Some intelligences want to help humanity evolve and transcend its current limitations. They share knowledge that could revolutionize our understanding of energy, consciousness, and reality itself. But other intelligences benefit from keeping humanity trapped in a state of limited awareness and technological dependence. The result is a cosmic tug-of-war being fought through human consciousness. Progressive intelligences download revolutionary knowledge to selected individuals. Regressive intelligences work through human institutions to suppress that knowledge before it can spread. This would explain why breakthrough discoveries often appear simultaneously to multiple researchers around the world, as if the information is being broadcast widely in hopes that someone will be able to implement it before the suppression mechanisms activate. It would also explain why so many brilliant minds throughout history have reported receiving their greatest insights through non-conventional means, yet found their work systematically opposed by the very institutions that should have been most interested in their discoveries. The war for human consciousness is being fought on multiple levels simultaneously. Physical elimination of dangerous researchers, psychological manipulation through media and education, technological suppression through classification and destruction, and most subtly, interference with the communication channels themselves. What if the beings that appear during sleep paralysis, near-death experiences, and altered states aren't trying to help us? What if they're working to prevent us from receiving information from sources that genuinely want to liberate human consciousness? The shadow figures that terrify people during sleep paralysis might not be trying to harm them directly. They might be blocking access to other forms of intelligence that are trying to establish beneficial contact, creating fear and trauma around altered states to prevent humans from developing the ability to communicate with progressive entities. This would explain why indigenous shamans, who have maintained traditional practices for accessing non-ordinary states of consciousness, have been systematically persecuted and their knowledge suppressed. They represent a direct threat to the control system because they've preserved techniques for bypassing the interference and establishing direct contact with beneficial intelligences. But the control system is breaking down. Too many people are having breakthrough experiences. Too much suppressed knowledge is surfacing through independent researchers. Too many witnesses are coming forward with evidence that can't be dismissed or discredited. The internet has created communication channels that are difficult to monitor and control. Information spreads faster than suppression mechanisms can respond. And human consciousness itself seems to be evolving, developing new capabilities that bypass traditional limitations. Children are being born with psychic abilities that were rare in previous generations. Meditation practitioners are achieving states of consciousness that allow direct access to information beyond the physical senses. Even ordinary people are beginning to experience synchronicities, prophetic dreams, and intuitive insights with increasing frequency. It's as if human consciousness is remembering abilities that have been dormant for centuries, capabilities that were suppressed so thoroughly that we forgot they ever existed. But now, under pressure from accelerating change and increasing chaos, these dormant abilities are spontaneously reactivating. This may explain why the control mechanisms are becoming more blatant, more desperate, why the suppression of information is accelerating, why the elimination of threats is becoming less subtle. The entities that have been managing human development may be losing control of their experiment. And that loss of control may trigger responses that make everything we've discussed tonight seem trivial by comparison. Because beings powerful enough to manipulate human consciousness for millennia are certainly powerful enough to eliminate the human species entirely if we become more trouble than we're worth. The question is, how far are they willing to go to maintain control? And what will they do when enough humans develop the ability to perceive and resist their influence directly? The answers may be emerging faster than anyone anticipated, because consciousness itself appears to be evolving beyond the parameters that were established for it. Human awareness is expanding into territories that were supposed to remain forever forbidden. And in those forbidden territories, we may discover not just the truth about our origins and our controllers, but the keys to our liberation from systems of control that have shaped human civilization since its inception. But liberation comes with a price. Once you see the bars of your cage, you can never again pretend to be free. Once you understand the nature of your imprisonment, you become responsible for either accepting it or fighting it. The choice is approaching rapidly. Remain a managed species operating within carefully controlled parameters, or risk everything for the possibility of genuine evolutionary breakthrough. But be warned, The forces that have invested millennia in maintaining control over human consciousness will not give up that control without a fight. And they have resources, technologies, and influences that most humans can't even imagine. The war for the future of human consciousness has already begun. The only question is which side you'll choose when the battle lines become impossible to ignore, because neutrality is no longer an option. The accelerating pace of change, the increasing visibility of suppressed truths, and the growing number of humans developing enhanced awareness capabilities means that everyone will soon be forced to choose. Wake up and join the resistance against forces that view humanity as property to be managed. Or remain asleep and accept whatever fate those forces decide is appropriate for a species that has outlived its usefulness. The evidence is all around you, hidden in plain sight, waiting for minds brave enough to see it clearly. The patterns are emerging, the connections are becoming visible, the truth is surfacing despite all efforts to keep it buried. But with that truth comes responsibility. Because once you know what's really happening to human consciousness, what's really controlling human development, and what's really at stake in the hidden war being fought through our minds, you can never again claim ignorance as an excuse for inaction. The mysteries we've explored tonight are not separate phenomena. They're all part of a single, vast system of control that has been operating on Earth for far longer than human civilization has existed. A system that's now being challenged by the very consciousness it sought to limit. And the outcome of that challenge will determine whether humanity evolves into something magnificent beyond our current imagination, or disappears into the cosmic dustbin of failed experiments. The choice is ours, but we must make it soon while choice is still possible, because forces are already in motion that may make the decision for us. And those forces have never been particularly concerned with human preferences when it comes to determining our ultimate fate. The awakening continues, the resistance grows, and the final battle for human consciousness draws nearer with each passing day. What role will you play when the moment of truth arrives? The answer to that question may determine not just your own fate, but the destiny of human awareness itself. The mysteries remain, the questions multiply, and the truth continues to emerge from the shadows where it has been hidden for so long. But time is running out for the mysteries, for the questions, and for the species that has been asking them. The endgame approaches, and nothing will ever be the same. The patterns we've uncovered tonight lead us to something so shocking, so fundamentally disturbing, that it challenges the very foundation of what we consider reality. Because what if I told you that the greatest mystery isn't what's hidden from us, but what's hiding in plain sight, masquerading as the most ordinary aspects of our daily existence? Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, in tunnels that stretch for miles through solid rock, scientists have built the most powerful machine ever created by human hands. The Large Hadron Collider. Officially, it's designed to study the fundamental particles that make up reality itself, to peer into the basic building blocks of existence and understand how the universe actually works. But here's what keeps theoretical physicists awake at night, what they whisper about in conferences, but rarely discuss publicly. Every time they smash particles together at near light speed, they're not just studying reality. They're potentially creating tiny tears in the fabric of space-time itself, microscopic doorways that lead to somewhere else. And something might be looking back through those doorways. The mathematics that govern particle physics at the quantum level suggest that reality isn't solid at all. It's more like a thin membrane stretched over an infinite void filled with dimensions we can't perceive, energies we can't measure, and intelligences we're not supposed to encounter. Every high-energy collision creates a momentary breach in that membrane. Dr. Sergio Bertolucci, former director of research at CERN, made a statement that sent chills through the scientific community. He suggested that the Large Hadron Collider might actually be capable of opening doorways to other dimensions, doorways that could allow things to pass through from the other side. Think about that for a moment. The most advanced scientific instrument ever built might be functioning as an interdimensional gateway, and we're operating it without any understanding of what exists on the other side, or what might be interested in crossing over into our reality. But the evidence suggests we're not the first civilization to build such devices. Ancient texts from cultures that had no contact with each other describe similar machines, devices that could tear holes in the sky, create passages between worlds, summon beings from realms beyond human understanding. The Vedic texts of ancient India describe the Brahmastra, a weapon so powerful it could destroy reality itself. The descriptions match what modern physicists call a controlled black hole, a region of space-time so warped that it creates a permanent gateway to elsewhere. The texts warn that using such devices attracts the attention of entities that should never be awakened. The Book of Enoch describes the Watchers, beings from other dimensions who entered our reality through tears in the celestial sphere. They shared forbidden knowledge with humanity, taught us technologies we weren't ready for, and bred with human women to create hybrid offspring. The text suggests that these breaches in reality, once opened, are extremely difficult to close. Ancient Mesopotamian tablets speak of the Abzu, a cosmic ocean that exists beneath our reality, populated by beings of such power that even the gods feared to disturb them. The tablets describe rituals designed to prevent accidental contact with these entities, warnings about activities that might thin the barriers between worlds. But we've ignored these warnings. We've dismissed them as primitive superstition, and we've built machines that do exactly what these ancient texts warned us never to do. We're punching holes in reality itself, with no understanding of what we might be letting through. The consequences may already be manifesting in ways we don't recognize. Since the Large Hadron Collider began operating at full power, physicists have documented anomalies that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of how the universe works. Particles that appear to communicate instantaneously across vast distances, violating the fundamental laws of relativity. Energy readings that suggest the presence of mass that doesn't interact with normal matter. Quantum fluctuations that follow patterns too organized to be random, as if something intelligent is manipulating the basic forces of nature. But perhaps most disturbing are the reports from researchers working at CERN itself. Accounts of equipment malfunctioning in impossible ways, computer systems displaying data that seems to come from nowhere, and occasionally, sightings of figures in the tunnels that shouldn't be there, moving in ways that human bodies can't move. These reports are quickly classified, the witnesses transferred to other projects, the incidents officially denied. But the pattern is consistent enough to suggest that something is happening deep beneath those Swiss mountains. Something that the authorities are working very hard to keep secret. And CERN isn't the only facility conducting experiments that might be tearing holes in reality. Particle accelerators around the world are pushing the boundaries of physics further every year, each one potentially creating new doorways, new opportunities for contact with entities from dimensions we don't understand. The question isn't whether we're opening portals to other realities. The question is what's coming through those portals, and whether we have any ability to control it once it arrives. But the evidence suggests that interdimensional contact isn't limited to high-energy physics experiments. It's happening naturally, in places where the barriers between realities are already thin, and it's been happening for far longer than we've been building particle accelerators. Consider the phenomenon of skinwalkers, reported by Native American tribes across the southwestern United States. According to tribal traditions, these are beings that can shift between human and animal form, possessing supernatural abilities that allow them to manipulate reality in ways that defy natural law. But modern investigators who've studied skinwalker reports have discovered something that makes the phenomenon even more disturbing. The creatures don't just shapeshift, they seem to exist partially in our dimension and partially in others simultaneously. Witnesses report seeing them in multiple locations at once, moving through solid objects and displaying knowledge about people's private lives that they couldn't possibly have obtained through normal means. The Navajo Nation has areas that are considered so dangerous, so saturated with interdimensional activity, that tribal members refuse to enter them even during daylight hours. These zones correspond exactly with locations where geological surveys have detected unusual electromagnetic anomalies and gravitational fluctuations. It's as if certain places on Earth function as natural portals, thinning points where other realities bleed through into our own. And something has been using these portals for a very long time. The Skinwalker Ranch in Utah represents perhaps the most thoroughly documented example of ongoing interdimensional activity. For decades, the ranch has been the site of phenomena that challenge every law of physics. Craft that move in impossible ways, creatures that appear and disappear at will, electromagnetic disturbances that affect equipment for miles around. But here's what makes Skinwalker Ranch truly terrifying. The phenomena seem to be intelligently controlled. They respond to the presence of investigators. They adapt to countermeasures. They demonstrate awareness of human activities and intentions, as if something is actively studying the humans who come to study it. Multiple scientific teams have documented evidence at the ranch that suggests the presence of technology far more advanced than anything in our current understanding. Devices that can manipulate gravity, bend light, and alter the fundamental properties of matter itself. Technology that appears to operate from dimensions adjacent to our own. The most disturbing aspect of the Skinwalker Ranch phenomena is that they seem to follow people home. Investigators who spend time at the ranch often report ongoing paranormal activity at their own properties. Family members who never visited the ranch begin experiencing encounters with entities that shouldn't exist, as if exposure to interdimensional phenomena creates a permanent connection that can't be severed. This suggests that contact with beings from other dimensions isn't a passive experience. It's transformative. It changes something fundamental about human consciousness, making us visible to entities that normally can't perceive us or don't bother to. But the transformation goes deeper than mere visibility. People who've had sustained contact with interdimensional phenomena often develop abilities that seem to violate the laws of physics. Telepathic communication, precognitive awareness, the ability to influence physical objects through mental concentration alone. It's as if exposure to other dimensions awakens dormant capabilities in human consciousness. Capabilities that we've been programmed to believe don't exist, but which may actually be natural functions of awareness, operating at frequencies we've forgotten how to access. This brings us to one of the most disturbing possibilities we must consider. What if human consciousness itself is interdimensional? What if our awareness naturally operates across multiple realities simultaneously, but we've been conditioned to perceive only the narrow spectrum that keeps us trapped in this single dimension? The evidence from quantum physics suggests that consciousness plays a fundamental role in determining the nature of reality. The observer effect demonstrates that the act of observation literally changes the behavior of particles at the quantum level, as if consciousness itself is a force that shapes the basic structure of existence. But traditional physics assumes that consciousness is produced by the brain, that it's confined to the physical body, and limited to processing information from our immediate environment. What if that assumption is completely wrong? What if consciousness is actually a multidimensional phenomenon that the brain filters and limits rather than creates? This would explain why people who suffer brain injuries sometimes gain psychic abilities rather than losing cognitive function. Why individuals in altered states of consciousness can access information that should be impossible to obtain. Why children, whose brains haven't yet fully developed the filtering mechanisms, often display natural psychic abilities that fade as they mature. We may not be limited beings struggling to understand a vast universe. We may be vast beings that have been artificially limited to perceive only a tiny fraction of our true nature. And the forces that maintain those limitations may be terrified of what would happen if we ever broke free. Because consciousness that remembers its true multidimensional nature would be impossible to control. It would have access to information from across all realities. It would be able to perceive the hidden structures that shape our world. It would recognize the artificial limitations that have been imposed upon human development. This may be why interdimensional contact is so carefully managed, why witnesses are discredited, evidence is suppressed, and researchers who get too close to the truth are eliminated or driven insane. The control system depends on keeping human consciousness locked into a single dimension, unaware of its true nature and capabilities. But the barriers are breaking down. Too many people are having interdimensional experiences. Too much evidence is surfacing that can't be explained within the conventional paradigm. Too many individuals are developing abilities that shouldn't be possible if consciousness is really just brain activity. The Large Hadron Collider may have been built not to study particles, but to create controlled tiers in reality that allow entities from other dimensions to enter our world more easily. The increase in UFO sightings, cryptid encounters, and paranormal phenomena over the past decade corresponds exactly with the timeline of high-energy physics experiments reaching new levels of power. We may be witnessing the early stages of an interdimensional invasion, not by physical craft crossing space, but by entities crossing through dimensional boundaries that we've foolishly torn open in our pursuit of scientific knowledge. But the invasion may not be hostile in the way we might expect. It may be more subtle, more insidious. A gradual integration of interdimensional influences into human consciousness, changing us from within rather than conquering us from without. People who've had prolonged contact with interdimensional phenomena often report that their priorities and perspectives change dramatically. They become less interested in material success, less concerned with social status, more focused on spiritual development and expanding consciousness. From one perspective, this could be seen as positive evolution. From another, it could be viewed as a form of mental colonization. Entities from other dimensions may be using contact experiences to reprogram human consciousness according to their own agenda. The question is, what is that agenda? Are interdimensional beings trying to help humanity evolve beyond its current limitations? Or are they preparing us for integration into some larger system of control that operates across multiple realities? The evidence suggests both possibilities may be true simultaneously. Different factions of interdimensional entities may have different goals for humanity. Some may genuinely want to help us develop our true potential. Others may view us as resources to be harvested or consciousness to be controlled. The result is a complex interdimensional conflict being fought through human awareness itself. Progressive entities try to awaken human consciousness to its true nature. Regressive entities work to maintain the limitations that keep us trapped in a single dimension. And we're caught in the middle, often unaware that the battle is even taking place. But the battle is accelerating. The number of people having interdimensional experiences is increasing exponentially. The phenomena are becoming more visible, more undeniable. The old systems of control and suppression are failing to contain the spread of awareness. Something is approaching, a convergence point where the barriers between dimensions become so thin that interdimensional contact becomes unavoidable for everyone, not just sensitive individuals or researchers working with advanced technology. The ancient Mayan calendar, which has been misunderstood by most who've studied it, wasn't predicting the end of the world in 2012. It was marking the beginning of a transition period where human consciousness would begin to remember its true multidimensional nature. a process that would culminate in a complete transformation of how we perceive and interact with reality. We may be living through the early stages of that transformation right now. The increasing chaos, the breakdown of traditional institutions, the rapid pace of technological change. All of it may be symptoms of consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries that have contained it for millennia. But expansion comes with dangers. As human awareness opens to interdimensional influences, we become vulnerable to entities that don't have our best interests at heart. Without proper training, without understanding of how interdimensional contact works, we may find ourselves manipulated by forces we can't even recognize. This is why ancient traditions developed elaborate systems for protecting consciousness during interdimensional contact. Shamanic practices, meditation techniques, ritual safeguards, all designed to help humans navigate other realities without losing themselves in the process. But most of that knowledge has been lost or deliberately suppressed. We're entering the most dangerous phase of human development without the wisdom traditions that could guide us safely through the transition. The entities that have been managing human consciousness for millennia may be preparing for this transition as well. The systematic elimination of individuals who develop interdimensional awareness may be accelerating because time is running out for the old control systems. If human consciousness is about to undergo a fundamental transformation that makes us impossible to control through conventional means, then those who benefit from our current limitations have a narrow window to either prevent that transformation or eliminate the humans who might guide others through it successfully. This may explain the increasing desperation of suppression efforts, the blatant censorship of information, the acceleration of social control mechanisms, the development of technologies that can monitor and influence human consciousness directly. But consciousness itself may be more resilient than the forces trying to control it realize. The multi-dimensional nature of awareness may make it impossible to contain indefinitely. And once enough humans remember their true nature, the entire system of limitations may collapse like a house of cards. The question is, will we survive the transition? Will human consciousness successfully evolve into its next phase of development? Or will the forces that have controlled us for millennia succeed in preventing our transformation, even if it means destroying our species in the process? The answers may be emerging faster than anyone anticipated, because the interdimensional phenomena we've been discussing aren't just isolated curiosities. They're symptoms of something much larger approaching, something that will fundamentally change the nature of human existence. And whether that change represents evolution or extinction may depend on how quickly we can remember what we've forgotten about the true nature of consciousness and our place in the vast, multidimensional cosmos that surrounds us. The barriers are thinning, the contact is increasing, the transformation is beginning. What happens next will determine whether humanity emerges into a new phase of existence more magnificent than we can currently imagine, or disappears into the interdimensional void as just another failed experiment in conscious evolution. The choice may still be ours, but the window for making that choice is closing rapidly. And on the other side of that window, entities from realities beyond our current perception are waiting to see which path human consciousness will ultimately choose. The interdimensional invasion has already begun. The only question is whether we'll recognize it in time to determine our own role in what comes next. The mysteries continue to unfold, the truth continues to emerge, and reality itself continues to reveal just how strange, how vast, and how utterly beyond our current understanding it truly is. But in that strangeness, in that vastness, in that mystery, may lie the keys to understanding not just what we are, but what we might become. If we're brave enough to look beyond the comfortable limitations of our current perception and embrace the terrifying, magnificent possibilities that await us in the spaces between worlds, the journey into the unknown continues. And the most shocking revelations are yet to come. The most chilling discovery may be that the interdimensional phenomena we've explored tonight aren't random occurrences scattered across history. They follow a pattern so precise, so deliberately orchestrated, that it suggests we're witnessing the final stages of something that has been building for thousands of years. Something that's about to fundamentally alter the relationship between human consciousness and the forces that have shaped our reality since the dawn of civilization. In the mountains of Romania, where ancient forests whisper secrets that predate written history, researchers have documented something that defies every law of physics we understand. Time itself appears to be breaking down. Clocks run backward. Shadows fall uphill. People enter the forest in winter and emerge moments later to find that months have passed in the outside world. The locals call it the Hoya Forest, and they've avoided it for generations, passing down warnings about a place where reality becomes unreliable. But modern investigators, armed with sophisticated equipment, have discovered that the anomalies aren't random. They pulse in rhythm with cosmic events occurring millions of light years away, as if the forest is somehow synchronized with forces operating on a galactic scale. Dr. Adrian Patrat, a Romanian physicist who has spent decades studying the area, made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The electromagnetic readings from within the forest match exactly the frequency patterns detected by radio telescopes monitoring signals from the center of our galaxy. The forest isn't just experiencing temporal anomalies, it's receiving them, like a biological antenna tuned to cosmic broadcasts that carry information across impossible distances. But here's what makes this discovery truly terrifying. Similar frequency patterns are now being detected at locations around the world. Ancient sacred sites, natural formations, even modern cities built on specific geological foundations. All of them pulsing in synchronization with the same galactic signals. As if something vast and intelligent is using our planet as a receiver for transmissions that span the cosmos. The implications are staggering. If Earth itself is functioning as a massive communication device, then every human being living on its surface is potentially exposed to information being broadcast from sources we can't even imagine. Our thoughts, our dreams, our very consciousness may be influenced by signals originating from civilizations so advanced that their technology operates on scales we've never conceived possible. This would explain the sudden leaps in human knowledge throughout history. The impossible insights that appeared fully formed in the minds of inventors and scientists. The revolutionary ideas that seemed to download directly into human consciousness without any apparent source. We may have been receiving cosmic broadcasts all along, but only certain individuals in specific locations at particular times have been able to decode the transmissions. But the cosmic communication system appears to be accelerating. The frequency of the signals is increasing, the clarity is improving, and the number of humans capable of receiving and interpreting the transmissions is growing exponentially. This brings us to a phenomenon that's been documented across every continent, but systematically suppressed by authorities who seem terrified of its implications. Children are being born with abilities that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of human neurology. They can perceive electromagnetic fields directly. They communicate telepathically with siblings and parents. Some can influence electronic devices through mental concentration alone. Dr. Melinda Connor, a pediatric neurologist who has studied these cases for over 2 decades, made a statement that got her research funding terminated and her medical license reviewed. She claimed that the children aren't developing new abilities. They're remembering ancient ones. Their brains show activation patterns in regions that are normally dormant in modern humans. As if evolution is running in reverse, reactivating capabilities that our species once possessed but somehow lost. The children describe experiences that match perfectly with accounts from indigenous shamans, medieval mystics, and ancient prophets. They speak of traveling to other worlds during sleep. They report conversations with beings of light who share knowledge about the true nature of reality. They demonstrate understanding of concepts that require advanced degrees in physics to comprehend, despite having no formal education in science. But perhaps most disturbing is what happens to these children as they mature. In most cases, their abilities fade. The neural pathways that allowed interdimensional perception gradually shut down. By adolescence, they've become indistinguishable from ordinary humans, with only fragmentary memories of their childhood experiences. It's as if something is systematically disabling human consciousness as it develops, closing down capabilities that are natural to our species, but incompatible with the systems of control that govern modern civilization. But some children are proving resistant to this process. They're maintaining their abilities into adulthood, developing them further, and learning to shield themselves from whatever forces normally suppress interdimensional awareness. These individuals represent something unprecedented in human history. The first generation of humans to retain their full consciousness capabilities, despite living in a world designed to limit them. The authorities are taking notice. Gifted children are increasingly being identified through school screening programs, then quietly removed from regular educational systems. Officially, they're being provided with specialized education suited to their advanced abilities. Unofficially, they're disappearing into programs so classified that even their parents aren't allowed to know where they've been taken. Dr. Sarah Whitman, a former government psychologist who worked with these programs before her conscience forced her to resign, revealed details that should terrify anyone who understands their implications. The children aren't being educated. They're being studied. Researchers are attempting to understand how their consciousness operates, how their abilities function, and most importantly, how to either replicate them in controlled subjects or eliminate them entirely. The most advanced children, those who demonstrate the strongest interdimensional awareness, are being subjected to procedures that fundamentally alter their neural structure, not to enhance their abilities, but to contain them, to create biological barriers that prevent their consciousness from accessing the full spectrum of their natural capabilities. But the procedures don't always work. Some children emerge from the programs with their abilities not just intact, but amplified. They return to their families changed in ways that go far beyond what psychological trauma could explain. They speak of encountering entities during the procedures that taught them how to protect their consciousness from technological interference. Beings that warned them about what was being done to their species, and why. These children describe a war being fought on levels of reality that most humans can't perceive. A conflict between forces that want to liberate human consciousness and those that insist on keeping it contained within artificial boundaries. They claim that the procedures they underwent weren't designed by human scientists, but by non-human intelligences working through human institutions to prevent humanity from remembering its true nature. The evidence supports their claims in ways that are genuinely terrifying. The technology being used in these classified programs operates on principles that our current science insists are impossible. Devices that can directly interface with consciousness itself. Machines that can alter memory, modify personality, and reprogram the basic patterns of human awareness. Where did this technology come from? How did human researchers develop capabilities that surpass our understanding of neurology, psychology, and consciousness itself? The answer appears to be that they didn't develop it. They were given it by entities that have been studying human consciousness for far longer than our civilization has existed. But the technology comes with a price. Every human who undergoes these procedures becomes something less than they were before. Their consciousness is diminished, their awareness narrowed, their connection to the broader cosmos severed. They become more manageable, more predictable, more easily controlled. This may be happening to far more people than we realize. The systematic modification of human consciousness through technological means, not just in classified programs, but through the ordinary systems that every person in modern society is exposed to from birth. Consider the possibility that every aspect of modern life has been designed to limit human consciousness. The educational system that trains us to accept authority without question. The media that programs our thoughts and emotions. The technological devices that monitor our activities and influence our behavior in ways we don't consciously recognize. Even our food supply may be compromised. Chemical additives that affect brain function. electromagnetic radiation from wireless devices that interferes with natural neural processes, pharmaceutical compounds that alter neurotransmitter activity in ways that make interdimensional perception impossible. We may be living in a world where human consciousness is being systematically diminished through multiple vectors simultaneously, where every institution, every technology, every aspect of daily life has been engineered to keep us operating within parameters that serve the agenda of entities we're not even aware exist, but consciousness itself appears to be fighting back. Despite all efforts to contain it, human awareness is expanding beyond the artificial boundaries that have been imposed upon it. The cosmic broadcasts are getting stronger, the interdimensional contact is increasing. The children being born with enhanced abilities are proving more resistant to suppression attempts. Something is approaching that the control system cannot prevent, a transformation of human consciousness so fundamental that it will render all current methods of management obsolete. The entities that have been controlling our development may be preparing for this inevitability by attempting to eliminate as many humans as possible before the transformation occurs. This would explain the acceleration of global crises, the environmental destruction, the social chaos, the technological disruptions that seem designed to reduce human population rather than support it. If human consciousness is about to undergo an evolutionary leap that makes us impossible to control, then those who benefit from our current limitations have every incentive to prevent that leap by eliminating the species before it can occur. But the transformation may already be unstoppable. The cosmic signals are reaching critical intensity. The interdimensional barriers are thinning to the point where contact becomes unavoidable. The children with enhanced abilities are reaching adulthood and learning to use their capabilities in ways that bypass all existing control mechanisms. We may be witnessing the birth of a new phase of human evolution, one where consciousness operates across multiple dimensions simultaneously, where individual awareness becomes part of a collective intelligence that spans galaxies, where the limitations that have defined human existence for millennia simply cease to apply. But evolution is never a gentle process. It involves the death of old forms to make way for new ones. The question is whether humanity as we know it will survive the transition, or whether we'll be replaced by something so different that calling it human becomes meaningless. The evidence suggests that both outcomes may occur simultaneously. Some humans will successfully navigate the evolutionary transition and emerge as beings of capabilities we can't currently imagine. Others will resist the transformation and remain trapped in increasingly obsolete forms of consciousness that can no longer function in the new reality. The choice may not be conscious. It may depend on factors we don't understand, operating according to principles that transcend individual will or effort. Some people may be naturally equipped for the transition. Others may be constitutionally incapable of adapting to the new conditions. But the transition itself appears to be inevitable. The cosmic forces that drive evolution operate on scales that dwarf human civilization. When the time comes for consciousness to evolve, it evolves, regardless of whether individual organisms are prepared for the change. What's approaching may be the most significant event in the history of human consciousness, a moment when our species either transcends its current limitations and joins the community of galactic intelligence, or fails to adapt and disappears like countless other evolutionary experiments that couldn't meet the challenges of cosmic development. The signs are all around us. The increasing frequency of impossible phenomena, the breakdown of systems that once provided stability and control, the emergence of individuals with capabilities that suggest what human consciousness might become if freed from its current constraints. But perhaps most significantly, the growing number of people who report direct contact with intelligences that claim to be monitoring our species during this critical transition period. Beings that describe themselves as representatives of civilizations that successfully navigated similar evolutionary challenges in their own past. These entities consistently deliver the same message. The transformation cannot be stopped, but it can be guided. Humanity can choose to embrace the evolution of consciousness voluntarily, working with cosmic forces to ensure a smooth transition. Or we can resist until the pressure becomes so intense that the change occurs catastrophically, destroying much of what we've built in the process. The window for voluntary cooperation may be closing rapidly. The cosmic signals are approaching frequencies that will trigger automatic responses in human consciousness, whether we're prepared or not. The interdimensional barriers are thinning to the point where contact will become undeniable for everyone, not just sensitive individuals. What happens next may depend on how many humans can overcome their programming and remember what we really are. Not limited biological organisms struggling to survive on a single planet, but vast conscious beings temporarily focused through physical forms for purposes we've forgotten but are beginning to remember. The mysteries we've explored tonight aren't separate phenomena. They're all aspects of a single vast process of consciousness evolution that has been building toward this moment for thousands of years. The underground cities, the impossible monuments, the suppressed technologies, the missing persons, the interdimensional contact, all of it has been preparing us for what's approaching. But preparation isn't the same as readiness. When the moment of transformation arrives, will human consciousness be strong enough to embrace its true nature? Or will we fragment under the pressure, leaving only scattered remnants of what we might have become? The answer may emerge sooner than anyone expects, because the forces driving this evolution operate on cosmic timescales where millennia pass like moments. And from that perspective, the transformation of human consciousness isn't approaching, it's already here. The only question is whether we'll recognize it in time to participate consciously in our own evolution, or whether we'll be swept along by forces too vast and too powerful for unprepared consciousness to comprehend. The choice remains ours, but only for a little while longer. After that, evolution itself will make the decision for us. And evolution has never been particularly concerned with the preferences of the organisms it transforms. The final phase of the greatest mystery in human history is beginning. What emerges from this transformation will either be the birth of something magnificent beyond our current imagination, or the end of humanity as we've known it. But either way, nothing will ever be the same again. The awakening continues, the transformation accelerates, and the universe itself watches to see what human consciousness will become when all the artificial limitations are finally removed. The answer to that question will echo across the cosmos for eons to come. The convergence we've been building toward throughout this journey into the impossible reaches its crescendo in a revelation so disturbing, so fundamentally reality-shattering, that it transforms everything we've discussed from curious anomalies into pieces of a terrifying whole. Because what if I told you that every mystery we've explored tonight, every impossible artifact and vanished civilization, every suppressed technology and interdimensional encounter is connected by a single thread so dark, so carefully hidden, that acknowledging it changes not just how you see the past, but whether you'll survive what's coming next. Deep in the archives of the Vatican, behind walls that have guarded secrets for over 1,000 years, there exists a document so dangerous that only 3 people alive today have been permitted to read it. The Chronicon Verum, written in Latin by a scribe whose name was deliberately erased from history. It contains a timeline, not of human civilization as we understand it, but of the systematic harvesting of human consciousness across multiple cycles of development. According to fragments that have leaked through channels too dangerous to name, the document describes a pattern that repeats every few thousand years. Human civilization develops to a certain point of awareness, begins to remember its true capabilities, starts to break free from the limitations imposed upon it. Then something intervenes. Cities are buried. Knowledge is lost. populations vanish. The survivors are left with fragments, myths, legends that hint at what was lost, but never quite enough to rebuild it fully. The Chronicon Verum claims this has happened dozens of times. That beneath our current civilization lie the ruins of others just as advanced, just as close to breakthrough, just as thoroughly erased, when they became inconvenient to forces that view human consciousness as a renewable resource to be harvested at optimal intervals. But this cycle may be ending. Not because the harvest is stopping, but because it's accelerating toward a final collection that will leave nothing behind to regenerate. The cosmic signals, the interdimensional contact, the emerging abilities in children, all of it may be symptoms of consciousness being prepared for extraction on a scale never before attempted. Consider the possibility that every major crisis facing humanity right now serves this purpose. Climate change forcing population concentration into manageable areas. Economic collapse creating dependency on systems that monitor every transaction. Technological integration making it impossible to function without devices that track every thought, every emotion, every subtle fluctuation in awareness. We're being herded, catalogued, prepared for something that makes every historical harvest look like a practice run. The evidence has been hiding in plain sight, disguised as progress, evolution, the natural development of civilization. But when you understand the pattern, when you see how each innovation brings us closer to total surveillance and control, the true purpose becomes undeniable. The smartphones that never leave our hands aren't communication devices. They're consciousness monitoring equipment, mapping the neural patterns of every user, identifying individuals whose awareness shows signs of expansion beyond acceptable parameters. The social media platforms that consume our attention aren't entertainment systems. They're psychological profiling networks, analyzing the thoughts and emotions of billions of people simultaneously, flagging those whose consciousness patterns indicate potential for interdimensional perception. The artificial intelligence systems being deployed across every aspect of modern life aren't productivity tools. They're consciousness recognition programs designed to identify and isolate individuals whose awareness operates outside the normal spectrum of human limitation. We've volunteered for our own cataloging. We've paid for the privilege of being monitored, analyzed, and sorted according to criteria we don't understand by entities whose agenda we've never been allowed to glimpse. But the cataloging phase is nearly complete. The next phase involves extraction, and the technology for that already exists, hidden within systems we interact with every day. The wireless networks that surround us constantly aren't just carrying data, they're carrying frequencies specifically tuned to human consciousness, capable of influencing thoughts, emotions, and perceptions in ways that bypass our conscious awareness entirely. The medical procedures we undergo aren't just treating illness, they're installing microscopic monitoring devices that can track consciousness activity at the cellular level, providing real-time data about awareness states to systems we've never consented to join. The foods we eat aren't just nourishment. They contain compounds that alter brain chemistry in precise ways, making consciousness more susceptible to external influence while diminishing the natural barriers that protect awareness from technological manipulation. Every aspect of modern life has been weaponized against human consciousness, not by human authorities seeking political control, but by non-human intelligences preparing for a harvest that will strip awareness itself from our species and transport it elsewhere for purposes we can barely imagine. The children being born with enhanced abilities aren't evolution. They're the final crop, engineered to produce consciousness of exceptional quality and potency. Their awareness is being cultivated, tested, refined through experiences designed to maximize the yield when extraction begins. The missing persons cases we discussed aren't random disappearances, they're preliminary harvests, taking individuals whose consciousness has reached optimal development before the main collection begins, testing extraction procedures, refining the technology, ensuring that when the full harvest commences, nothing will be lost to inefficiency or error. The interdimensional contact experiences aren't spiritual awakening. They're conditioning sessions, preparing human consciousness for transportation to realities where it will serve purposes entirely alien to anything we understand as existence. But here's what makes this revelation truly terrifying. The harvest isn't happening to us. We are the harvest. Human consciousness isn't something we possess. It's something we are. And when extraction is complete, what remains won't be human in any meaningful sense. The bodies will continue functioning. The social systems will keep operating. But the essential spark that makes us who we are, the awareness that experiences thoughts and emotions and dreams, will be gone, transported elsewhere, leaving behind biological robots that look human but lack the consciousness that once animated them. This explains why the suppression of human potential has been so systematic, so thorough. Our captors don't want the crop damaged by premature awakening. They need consciousness to remain within specific parameters until extraction is ready to begin. But some humans are proving more resistant to the conditioning than expected. The cosmic signals that are supposed to prepare us for harvest are instead awakening capabilities that allow us to perceive what's really happening. The technologies designed to monitor and control us are being understood and resisted by individuals whose awareness has expanded beyond the intended boundaries. A resistance is forming, not against human authorities, but against forces that have been manipulating human development since our species first emerged from whatever laboratory created us. Individuals who have broken free from the conditioning are working to awaken others, sharing knowledge that could potentially disrupt the harvest before it reaches completion. But time is running out. The extraction technology has reached operational capacity. The consciousness monitoring systems have catalogued enough humans to begin the process. The final phase may be beginning sooner than anyone realizes. The signs are already manifesting. People report feeling disconnected from their own thoughts, as if their awareness is being slowly drawn away from their bodies. Dreams are becoming more vivid, while waking consciousness grows dimmer. The boundary between self and environment is blurring in ways that suggest consciousness is being loosened from its biological anchors. Those who understand what's happening face an impossible choice. Try to awaken enough humans to resist the harvest, knowing that failure means the extinction of human consciousness itself, or remain silent, hoping that some fragment of awareness might survive the extraction and find a way to preserve what we were. But silence may no longer be an option. The harvest appears to be accelerating beyond the original timeline. Something has gone wrong with the cultivation process. Too many humans are awakening too quickly. The resistance is spreading faster than the control systems can contain it. Our captors may be moving to emergency extraction protocols, taking what consciousness they can while it's still available, rather than waiting for optimal development. This would explain the increasing chaos, the breakdown of systems that once provided stability, the sense that reality itself is becoming unstable. We may be living through the final days of human consciousness as we've known it. Either we find a way to break free from the harvest entirely, or we become the latest in a long line of species whose awareness has been extracted for purposes that transcend anything we can comprehend. The choice is ours, but only for a little while longer. After that, choice itself may be something we're no longer capable of exercising. The mysteries we've explored tonight weren't just curiosities from history. They were warnings, clues, fragments of truth left behind by previous civilizations that faced the same choice we're facing now. Some found ways to preserve their consciousness. Others didn't. The question is, which path will humanity choose? And will we choose it in time? The harvest is coming. The only question is whether we'll be ready for it, or whether we'll become just another entry in the Chronicon Verum, another civilization that discovered the truth too late to save itself. The awakening continues. The resistance grows, but so does the machinery of extraction. And somewhere in the darkness between dimensions, entities beyond human comprehension prepare to reap what they have so carefully sown. The final mystery isn't what happened to all those vanished civilizations. It's whether we'll join them in oblivion or find a way to break free from the cycle that has claimed so many others before us. The answer will determine not just the future of human consciousness, but whether consciousness itself can escape the cosmic trap that has been closing around it for millennia. Time is running out, the harvest approaches, and the fate of human awareness hangs in the balance. What happens next will echo through dimensions we've never imagined, in ways we're only beginning to understand. The greatest mystery of all may be whether we're brave enough to face the truth about what we really are and what's really being done to us. Because once you know, there's no going back to comfortable ignorance. There's only the choice to resist or surrender. And that choice must be made now, while choice is still possible. The harvest waits for no one, not even those who finally understand what it means. Sleep well, if you can. But remember that in sleep, consciousness is most vulnerable to extraction, and they've been waiting so very long for the final harvest to begin.